Oh, hi everyone, welcome back. And I'm sorry if for people who got suddenly cut off there. I lost my internet for about seemingly like half an hour by the sounds of it. But we're back and we're bad, and I forget where we were. But hopefully, the callers here will put me back on the straight and narrow.
Well, for the listeners, would anybody mind if we still took maybe just 10 to 15 minutes and recapped what was not recorded?
Yeah, yeah, I have no problem with that.
Okay. Well, I know that one of the topics we were talking about was how after Jedi, it seemed like the reset button had just been hit with the Force Awakens. Here we are, 30 years later. The new government has now not really collapsed, but has allowed the First Order to come to power. And this is what we can expect, right, with any kind of state apparatus. If you roll back the state, it's just going to metastasize again, and a generation or so later, you've got the same problems that you had, 20 years ago. And we can also see this. This is analogous to the problems that Leia and Han have had, because both of them have failed to grow as well as people. Han is still a scoundrel, and Leia is still a sort of career-minded military commander now, and their son has suffered for it. They've lost their son to the dark side. And then Catherine had a really good analysis of Han's attempted confrontation with Kylo, if she'd like to go over that quickly.
Right. Well, I noticed you said that Han and Leia lost their son, and I don't think they actually lost him so
Oh
much
yeah,
as
yeah, gave
drove
him
him
up. Yeah,
drove him to the dark side with their bad parenting. Um, but
It's like a classic thing, isn't it? Like the rebellious kid who falls in with a bad gang, and it's not like the parents are better either. So it's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place, um, kind of thing, and he has to make that choice.
right. Well, Han and Leia did send Kylo Ren away to essentially like military school to join the Jedi training with Luke, and it was there that he went to the dark side after he was abandoned by his parents. And a lot is revealed by the scene, the climactic scene between Han and Kylo Ren about his parenting, just with the way he's speaking to Kylo. And I don't know if we want to recap that whole scene, but a lot of invalidation and dismissal and sort of giving Kylo orders. And Kylo responds by talking about his feelings and displaying curiosity. And Han makes it all about him and how he is experiencing missing Kylo and doesn't see Kylo Ren for who he truly is.
I mean, that's a good point because it does seem like that. I mean, most people watching that would probably say it's clearly good versus evil, isn't it? It's clearly good Han trying to save his, or kind of like naughty, a bit of a bad boy Han trying to save, but ultimately a good person Han trying to save his wayward son. But I mean, point there, yeah. I mean, it's a good point. That.
Yeah, but as Catherine pointed out in one of her posts that she made in the Freedom and Radio forums on the message boards, Han Solo is there to destroy the Death Star, so his son is inside, and he's pretty much there to kill him. Not necessarily he doesn't intend to kill him, but if he wouldn't have met him or saw him, he would have just detonated those bombs, and his son would have been dead. So,
right, Kylo is responding to a sort of life or death situation.
right. So, yeah, that is a good observation. It is serendipitous that he would just run into Kylo on the station, and if he hadn't, he may have very well succeeded, and they would have destroyed the Starkiller base with him on it, possibly, and he would have never known.
Yeah, exactly. Robin makes a comment about Snoke seducing Kylo, and I just wanted to point out that I don't think Kylo would have been seducible had he had good parents. Like I think, like that we see in
Oh,
we
yeah.
see in the prequels, the only person that's ever nice to Anakin is is Senator Palpatine, you know? So I think Snoke being able to seduce him probably was like the only person in his life who actually took an interest in Kylo. That's what I suspect.
Yeah, and this is the narrative. So, oh no, you go ahead first. It was directed at you.
Yeah. Oh no. Okay. Yeah. No, I definitely agree. That's why I mean I wrote. I thought it's a bit of both. And if you allow me, like I just wanted to add that little acknowledging because apparently in the novelization of the movie they expanded a bit on the history of Kylo and Leia and Han, which they seem to have cut out of the movie. And apparently Leia once tells Han at some point that like she actually like Snoke apparently has been watching over Kylo since he was a kid and trying to seduce him to the dark side. But Leia keeps this from Han until it's basically too late. And when she confesses that to Han, that she knew that Snoke was seducing him, like her excuse was to say she didn't think that or she thought that if Han knew, he would like blow up and like make it worse, and also because she thought as the kind of force-sensitive parent that was kind of her job. So she actually knows that Snoke has been trying to get at Kylo for years, probably, and just never mentioned it to anyone. And so I thought that's also like quite an interesting observation. And then yeah, so only after that, when they basically both give up hope, is when Han then leaves her and they both go separate ways. But yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm not saying that, like, obviously if they had a better bond, like none of that would have happened in the first place. But
right, yeah, and that would feed into why the First Order has basically a child army at their hands. It's because Snoke exploited the opportunity to act as a surrogate parent to all of these kids, basically. Took them under his wing and mentored them, listened to them, and very subtly manipulated them into doing some very horrible things because he was giving them what the parents couldn't or didn't.
No, I think that the army isn't that the. I don't even know his name. Like the guy who looks like Hitler in his speech, isn't that all his thing? I mean,
I think he was talking about the Knights of Ren.
Oh, okay, my bad.
Yeah, Jeff, I know you messaged me right before this hangout, and you brought up in your message quite interesting point of view about Han Solo and Leia, and you wanted to talk about the failure of these two characters to grow. So these people have not changed much through the years, and how this might have affected their son.
Sure, yeah. If like I said before, you still have Leia, who's seems to be pretty heavily involved in her career. I don't recall her being really well, no, I think by the second movie in the original trilogy, by Empire, she was acting as a military commander of sorts. And so 30 years later, again, she's still in that role. Han has fallen back into his scoundrel gambler ways, and because they've failed to grow as adults and they're still children, they were not equipped to properly mentor Ben, later Kylo, and the result is what we have in the film.
Yeah, he probably felt quite powerless to get his parents' attention, to be honest. I mean, if Leia's off, doing general stuff and Han's just not there at all, it would make him want that attention, that power. And then, obviously, as you say, it's just a classic thing, isn't it? Like, Snoke comes in and fills the void, gives him all these, he gets to idealize this, he's basically praised and he's given something to go for, isn't he? He's given, like, a goal, he's given, like, if you do this, you'll have so much power, it's... And then what that's the thing is when Han comes back, what bargaining chip has he got to try and win Kylo back to his side? It's like, he hasn't changed, has he? So it's like there's not much he can offer him apart from a life of obscurity and and a sort of non-relationship with his parents.
Yeah, the fun thing is that he does have a bargaining chip. He just doesn't realize it. If he only has to open up, and then there is a chance for a future. I mean, that's at least my own personal experience, and how, and I guess that's similar for for a lot of other people.
Right.
And but he doesn't know that, of course. He hasn't done the work to get back on old topic. He hasn't done the work to realize this, and so he is, in a very real sense, powerless.
Yeah,
Sure.
and I mean, you wonder. I mean, that's I just keep thinking. I just keep thinking about that. You know, where Kylo says, you know, it's too late. I just keep thinking about that. I mean, you know, it's sort of like, maybe it's just me and my own experience, but it is that kind of. It's almost like Han's got the bigger fantasy there, because he's going in thinking, you know, he can win him back, but Kylo actually does know the truth. He knows that he's done too much. You know, he's done slaughtered those villagers and just probably done many raids similar. And you know, Kylo understands when he says that. I think, and you just wonder like what his reaction would have, any of Han's reactions would be. I mean, you have to want. I mean, the thing about it, it's sort of like, I don't know. It comes across to me. It's like a false curiosity by Kylo, because like he understands that it's too late, and it's almost like he's just saying what he needs to say to draw Han to him, I guess, with this kind of simplified understanding that, you know, it's still my son. I can still bring him around. But I mean, there's just
It's more of the same.
Yeah, it's more of the same. Yeah, it'll just be, you know, you'll just fuck off again. You know,
yeah, because it used to work, and then it starts to not work, and then so they do it more and more and more until finally the relationship breaks.
Yeah, and I think it's also very interesting, like mirroring of the scene and the relationship to episode 6, when Luke goes and tries to get back his father to the dark side, but there it's the opposite, where basically he gets him back because Darth Vader, his father, sees him like almost killed by the Emperor. Then he kind of probably has this parental instinct for his son kicking back in, but of course as the neglected and abused child, you don't have the same like instinct for your father. So I thought that's quite a nice like kind of mirroring of the earlier movies. But also, I mean, I guess there might also be a slightly less philosophical explanation because Harrison Ford just wanted to have his character killed, so they kind of had to make that happen one way or another. But.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't help but think in that final scene when Hines gets the lightsaber through the chest. I couldn't help but think of single motherhood in that scene. You know, the lack of a father, the kind of because obviously a lot of young men that grow up in these single parent households, often with their mothers, they kind of have to deal with this. They don't really understand masculinity, don't really understand what it is to be a man, etc. And so that sort of ultimately killing his father is a kind of manly act in a sense, you know, at least in his mind, you know. And I couldn't help but think about that. Well, did other people have that kind of thought, or at least something similar?
It's kind of like a Defu taken to the extreme, isn't it? Because now he really is permanently casting off the what is dead weight in his opinion, the person who's holding him back from achieving greatness as a Sith Lord, ostensibly.
But couldn't you see it as kind of like a rage at the loss of the loss that he had of not having a father around?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly that too.
An unconscious rage, of course, quite possibly. I mean, I'm just because why didn't he kill Leia?
I guess it's because she just wasn't there to be killed.
Sure, yeah, the opportunity presented itself with Han.
Yeah, no, to again, from what I hear in the books, it's quite clear how he hates and despises his father, and like that he really, really can't stand him, like much more than in the movie. So I mean, I haven't read the book, but that's just what I heard. So.
But then again, the whole saga is centered on the disconnect and on the bad relationships between fathers and sons, isn't it? Am I wrong here?
No, yeah, I think one of the things about the people that we see going to the dark side, like Anakin and Kylo Ren, is that they see people for who they really are. Like he says to Rey, he talks about her friends. He says, "Oh, you mean the traitors, murderers, and thieves you call friends?" You know, I think there's something too like that. He's actually seeing reality where people on the side of the good are sort of caught up in this fantasy and delusion. I don't know. Do you
And
guys agree?
I think that that's an amazing point. And this is like conversely, this is how society views people who call out the truth. Those people have gone to the dark side and they are lost causes and they need to be fought with a rebellion and all kinds of stuff. And this is a theme that is like throughout Star Wars, through not just this movie, not just the movies, but everything that has to do with Star Wars has this narrative, this very same narrative.
Yeah, and speaking about this narrative, the narrative of Star Wars, what really bothered me about the whole saga, and if I understand correctly, again, I'm not an expert, far from being even acquainted to the movies, but what really bothers me, it seems that the movie put forward the idea that the way you fight evil is with magic, the Force, and violence.
Yep.
And again,
and following orders.
And this message is they're putting out this message out there for people, and you know, this movie usually appeals to young people, usually that have that need to be heroes, that feel the urge to fight evil, and then they have this release of being Star Wars fans, and they're being taught that, you know, first of all, you need magic, and then you need violence to fight evil, when in fact evil is fought with truth, with reason, and with non-compliance. So they're giving them a recipe for failure in these young people that grow up and might take an interest in actually fighting evil in the world. What do you guys think?
Well, I think that's. Oh no, you go first.
I was just going to say, yeah, that's absolutely accurate. Putting forth the idea that evil is fought with magic, with weapons, with violence, and certainly in the case of Luke, by abandoning your family and an honest profession, which in the original movie is what they call moisture farming. They're basically condensing water to sell on this desert planet, and that's seen as something that ultimately is inconsequential in the grand scheme of things, and you need to set your sights higher.
Yeah, I wanted to add on what you said, Adi, with and with something that's not really in this movie, so it might not be that interesting for the listeners who want to know about this movie, but like one of the major themes in Star Wars is this good versus evil, Jedi versus Sith narrative, where you kind of have to choose. Both parties will kind of force you into either you're with us or you're against us, and the Sith are all about embracing your evil emotions, which is of course anger and hatred and all those kinds of things, and the Jedi are about abandoning all emotion or repressing all emotion. And one thing that strikes me as interesting in this regard is that you are a good Jedi if you do not emotionally process what people are telling you. So in a sense, going to join the Jedi is a little bit like going to join your foo. For those of us who have that experience.
I'm sorry to interrupt. So the Jedi training requires self-erasure, and
yes.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
So you have to like not experience these emotions, up to the point where you don't even almost notice them at all. You have to repress everything, and like the better of a Jedi you are, the more you can, yeah, as Robin says, detach. You have to like truly detach, but at the same time also remain good and noble and help all these other people.
Right.
Well, that's like a terrible contradiction.
Of course.
Well, yeah.
I think Lucas probably possibly had that kind of hang up, which a lot of people have, which is like he probably feared his anger and then kind of made that into an enemy, rather than seeing like the value in it to get things done. Yeah, as I say, a very technically minded guy, and you can see in his dialogue there's not that kind of, when he's actually like left alone to write the dialogue, like in the prequels, it is that kind of stunted. There's just like it's not got that emotional flow to it. So you just wonder to what extent he kind of like didn't embrace his own anger in like a positive way, and instead kind of created this Jedi. And as you mentioned, I think it was Pim mentioned before, it's like it's it's like erasure. It's like you're erasing yourself, and it's like it doesn't help in terms of like spotting threat as well. I mean, you look at the prequels, which George Lucas did. It's like the Jedi are like blind, really. I mean, they've got that whole council, and they don't see these huge attacks that are coming. It's like because they're not emotionally processing anything.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, they're not seeing the bigger picture. Certainly in that case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, in Episode 4, there's a very clear line when Ben is first trying to instruct Luke. He tells him, "Reach out with your feelings, or stretch out with your feelings." One of those two. So again, that's a contradiction. The Jedi are supposed to repress themselves and be in this permanent Zen state, and yet reach out with their feelings in order to be the best Jedi that they can be.
Yeah, I think that's perhaps why the fights. People say the fight scenes left them cold in the prequels. Perhaps that's it, because it's like the Jedi's are fighting without anger. They're fighting like in a cold way, like going through the motions kind of thing.
Yeah, in the prequels they always look like very calm and carefully orchestrated.
Yeah, it's
dances, really.
Yeah.
Well, they don't really. I mean, it is even in Star Wars, it is a fantasy narrative, which is why it never works. Like there is a major overarching cycle in Star Wars that always ends up with some government or order or whatever popping up, destroying almost everything. The Jedi then barely managing to fight them off, only to have it all happen again a couple of years later. So they even the Star Wars universe itself realizes that it's not working.
Right.
And I think go ahead. Sorry.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to add to that this artificial distinction that both the Jedi and the Sith make between either you're with us or against us. I think that's one of the major reasons why characters like Anakin and Kylo seem to. Well, it's weird to imagine that this person who was once a nice guy falls and does all these horrifying things, but I think it's important to realize that that's what they've been told by their own parents. That's what they've been taught by the Jedi, that if you don't do all this perfectly, then you're going to fall to the dark side. And of course, so when these characters think that they don't stand up to what the Jedi have to offer, then they have to go to the dark side.
Right, it's all that extreme thinking.
Yeah, it doesn't. It seems like they're told that it's never okay to make a mistake. There's always some kind of severe punishment for making a mistake, and never a realization or instruction that hey, if you fail, I mean, inevitably you're going to learn something. The important thing is that you learn from that. You don't make the same mistake again. But it is okay to have missteps along the way.
Well, it sounds like, I don't know much about the movies, but the way you guys been talking about it, and I've been listening carefully, it sounds like the bright side is not so bright after all, and we have a dark side and then a darker side that go against each other.
it immediately put me in mind of school for some reason, like that, unless you do it in this very rigid way that the Jedi prescribe, and you don't bring your emotions to it, you don't have that kind of messy learning process, then yeah, it's like, oh, well, you're a bad person, fall to the dark side, if you're going to follow your feelings that way, you're angry. If you're going to embrace your feelings, then you're going to fall to the dark side. So, huge false dichotomy.
And the way you guys been talking about it, I mean, the bright side apparently teaches the Jedi to erase their feelings, but it seems to me that they're not advocating for reason and for critical thinking, since you guys been talking about just following pretty much blindly certain things. So that's quite odd to me, because if the narrative or the narrator wanted to advocate for reason and for critical thinking, it would have allowed the Jedi to question, not just to follow. Am I making sense here?
What they're advocating is to go for it's a bit of a religious experience. So they don't trust their feelings; they trust the Force, which is like this this experience that just pops in their heads or something, and they just have to go with that.
Okay. Because when you say cancel feelings, usually the reason is supposed to take over, at least in my mind. So
that's Star Trek, and that's a whole different subject.
Yeah, this is why I love Star Trek more than I like Star Trek more than I like Star Wars.
Well, Star Trek is statism, and Star Wars is religiosity.
Oh yeah, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, that's so true, Tim. Good point.
Good point. Yeah, really good point.
I was curious about the Jedi Council that you see in the prequels, and because I think, Pim or Rabba, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Luke was trying to sort of reestablish the Council and the Jedi School, and when you had in the Council days, it was follow the Council's orders over your own conscience, right? Because when they asked Anakin to spy on Jennifer Palpatine, even though Anakin really liked him, he's like, but that's wrong, and they're like, but you have to do it because we're ordering you to.
Yeah.
So I think if Luke was trying to recreate this sort of higher order, the Council, and I can understand why Kylo Ren would have gotten really angry and been uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, and I think you're right about that. I think the Jedi Order, to me, it seems because originally, what was it, like late 70s, early 80s, and I think that's when there was a huge surge in this kind of Eastern mysticism, Buddhism stuff that got popular, and I think to me the Jedi are more like typical Buddhist, like detachment, meditation. I think they also do have the thing about compassion for all living things, which is to me it's like almost one-to-one copy of basic Buddhist tenets, and I can see like how, if that was popular, especially I guess among the left, which I can only assume Lucas as a popular Hollywood film producer would identify as. So I can see how they would like view that as like the quote unquote good guys and portray them that way, even though of course, as we all know, the tenet, like the philosophies behind it are quite contradictory and irrational. So I would say like probably you could probably do the critique one-on-one, like the same thing that you would criticize Buddhism for, and then their tenets would just apply to the Jedi. I think that's probably the parallel.
Definitely, I think so. And of course, with Buddhists, you see they kind of have this sort of Zen, everyone, be calm and cool, but because they don't experience anger, they have this sort of outbursts of rage.
Yeah, and we sort of saw Han embracing one of the Buddhist tenets with Kylo, didn't we? In that believing that people are inherently good, and of course that didn't work out for him.
Right, believing that people might be universally good without actually looking at the individual.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that's something that's big in the prequels as well, with like the Lucas heavy prequels, is that like that inability to see the world the way it is and to have like process anger and you know, yeah, it's kind of a defensive thing, isn't it, to see people the way they are. I mean, I think the combat as well kind of reflects that, because it does seem kind of routine, and also, you know, he makes it a bit of a joke when when it's like meant to be like a battle between two opposing forces, and then he throws Jar Jar in the middle of it, and he's just like where, and it's like there's all this death going on everywhere, and he's like, you just throw Jar Jar, and it's like, you know, it's like he's not really taking into account like the seriousness of combat, and I don't know. I think that's the feeling I get from it. Is why the violence seems so kind of like routine and doesn't have the life or death kind of feel to it that the first ones had.
And I think that was prevalent in The Force Awakens also, because you have this sort of cheeky humor throughout, and I think it's just the people not connecting with their own feelings about that. Oh, this is a real life or death situation.
So is that so much in the actual battles, or like after the battles? Because I can understand the humor after the battle. I mean, yeah. I mean, the only thing I can think of, I've only seen it once. I can only think of the droid like being like a bit funny in the battles, but
Right. I guess I'm thinking more of Finn and Han's interactions.
Yeah, Finn had a few comebacks there, and there was a little bit of humor in there. But what I wanted, I think we should bring this to an end soon. So I also wanted to touch on the script and the way that the dialogue unfolded, and some things that really kind of bothered me. I think the writing of the script was very, very poor. And it seemed to me like I was watching a cartoon for, I don't know, 5-year-olds. They failed to explain a lot of things. For example, when Luke's lightsaber shows up, and that, what's her name? I have it written here because I cannot remember. Maz Kanata. I have no idea how to pronounce that. So she has Luke's lightsaber, and of course they're like, how did you get it? And she says, that's a good question for another time. And they have these poor like non-explanations throughout the movies. Throughout the movie. Also, what bothered me was when they made the plan to attack the Death Star, the huge Death Star on steroids. It was like 20 seconds. 20 seconds of the movie, they're like, okay, so we have the Death Star, we have these incredibly intricate plans, and they're like, oh, okay, there's the weak spot. And somebody goes, but they have the shields. What are we going to do about the shields? Explanation? We're going to take down the shields, and that's the plan. You know, I mean, I know it's a science fiction movie, and I don't want it to be very realistic, but give me at least a reasonable explanation and make me believe. I just couldn't handle the I think it was infantile. That's the word to describe it.
You need to watch the prequels. I mean, that just makes it look amazing. I mean, like when you actually watch the prequels and then compare it to this is like so far ahead of the prequels. I mean, the prequels are like, if you think this one's got like non sequiturs and inconsistencies in it, and the other Star Wars films are just like, they're so bad.
Yeah, they're much worse.
Oh, they're much worse?
Yeah.
Oh no, don't tell me.
I actually have to say this film was probably, whilst I kind of agree with your commentary on it, Aidy, a little bit like watching a cartoon. I've always felt that with Star Wars. It's always been a bit cartoonish to me. I think there is some deeper stuff. I wonder how much of this is about George Lucas, you know. But yeah, I mean.
Also, I just remembered, you know, when Han Solo dies, and then the camera shifts, is like a close-up on Princess Leia, and she feels the pain. How the hell does she know he died? Is like they don't have, the Force. Okay, I'm sorry.
But that's an old.
I keep forgetting about the Force, you know.
Yeah, that's something that you wouldn't. Unless you've seen Jedi and Return of the Jedi, where Luke explains to Leia that like you've got that power too, and in time you'll learn to control it as I have.
What? What do you mean? Doesn't she just get it like that? I mean, she's a woman, isn't she?
yeah. According to the new mythos, yeah, you got it or you don't. Exactly. The other thing I thought was especially funny about the Death Star planning was that forget who it was, but one of the characters says, "No, this isn't the Death Star. Here's the Death Star. Here's Star Killer Base," and Han literally says, "Okay, so it's bigger."
Yeah.
I know they didn't need to explain much of the plan because it was the exact same plan they had to destroy the Death Star.
Yeah. Another technical thing that bothered me. It was when they reveal R2 for the first time in the movie, and C-3PO says, "Well, it's highly unlikely that R2 has any useful information as to Luke's whereabouts, and he's been operating in low power ever since." It's like, okay, first of all, if the fate of the galaxy hinges on Luke's whereabouts, like the characters should be literally checking their own armpits for any clues as to where he is. And secondly, R2 is a droid. Turn him on, okay?
Yeah. Well, regarding that, what a big mystery to me was at the end, R2D2 just pops up. Just pulls out the map, the missing part of the map to Luke Skywalker. Well, how the hell did that happen? I mean, didn't the guys in the Death Star have the rest of the map? Where did that map come from?
It was literally the ghost in the machine.
Yep.
The Force.
Must have been
Magic.
Deus Ex Machina. Yes. No, but I think there's a lot of.
Well, it wasn't a big enough piece of the map, so he probably got depressed, went into low power. And you could only fit it in when they got the full map. So I don't know. Do droids get depressed? Who knows? Wasn't that how it worked? Like the other droid had like most of the map, and then R2 had the little piece where Luke was.
The other way around.
Or was it the other way around? Oh, never mind.
Yeah. From what I heard, that the clue of him to power back on was just when the other piece would come near him, so that he could combine it and show the map. I don't know, I guess Luke told him to power down until then or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it's not in the movie, so it's just one of those things they cut that you have to search the internet for.
I think, although I did like it because, like, I think if you watch the really George Lucas heavy prequels, I mean, that are very anti-emotion, I think anyway, like it basically demonizes them. Then this does have a lot more emotion in it, I think anyway. I haven't watched it. So it did seem like he basically said it a long time in the future, and then basically like put the emotion back into it. I mean, I'm not saying it's a perfect film, but certainly compared to the prequels, it's a masterpiece, really. Well,
right, compared to what? But
exactly, yeah.
It occurs to me that R2 is another abandoned character in the film. You know, his sort of master abandoned him. Sure. Everyone's abandoned in this film.
Yeah. I will say there is more showing and less telling than there was in the prequels. Like in Attack of the Clones, you got that horrible elevator quip.
Yeah,
haven't been this nervous since we fell into that nest of Gundarks.
Yeah.
So like, why didn't you just show us their relationship slowly being built over time, like you did in the original movies?
Yeah.
So. I think we should bring this to an end, but not before. I know Robin wanted to talk about a theory that he has about why these movies are so popular. And believe it or not, Robin, you wrote that in the chat, but that would have been my next question, my closing question for this hangout, because the plot is not very, very good. I mean, the CGI, I don't know very much about it because I watched a very crappy version of it on the internet, but I can assume that it's good. But the plot is crappy. The acting, I don't think is that good. I don't see why these people would make $40 billion off of this franchise. So, Robin, why do you think that happened? Why does Star Wars have so much success?
Yeah, so my theory is because I wondered that too, why I like them so much and why, because it's pretty much the only series I mean, not the only, but like I really, really like it, and I couldn't figure out why. And I think my theory is this, like it like I don't know what the word, like it brings you back to kind of this childlike age where like you play things like cops and robbers and you play war like, but in a fun way, like war for real is a terrible thing, but like if you just play it like knowing nothing serious is actually going to happen, it can be quite an adventurous and like a entertaining and exhilarating experience, right? And I think as an adult, I started playing laser tag occasionally, and I mean, you basically just run around trying to shoot people, but I mean, it's a whole lot of fun because no one gets hurt, it's not serious, and I think this is exactly what Star Wars does. Like, it's very consciously far removed from our reality. I mean, it starts with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, so they very consciously try to remove it to anything even remotely real and tangible that could have like a serious emotional like negative impact like a real war would have in that situation. And I think if you look at it more like a 10, 12-year-old like play act of war and like more in that sense, I think that like from that perspective, the dialogues make sense, why people can still choke while they have blaster fights, while people can like kill like stormtroopers not feel bad, why they do all these stunts, and I think from that sense it makes a whole lot of sense why the movie would be so like quote unquote badly written, because that's kind of the feeling and the experience they like to portray. And I think a lot of people go into movies and it's just like it's precisely because it's so far removed from our reality, you can just like enjoy it, feel like the 10-year-old again, get this experience. And I think this is a very unique experience in movie. Like, not a lot of movies do that, because most movies are very realistic and always have this connection to reality that kind of will nag you. But Star Wars is, I think, consciously so far removed. And of course, it's a perfect mix between fairy tales and sci-fi and fantasy and pretty much everything thrown together in a very unique and fun way, I think. And so that's kind of my theory why I think it's so popular. But let me know what you think.
Sure, yeah, it's one of the ultimate examples of escapism in pop culture. And also something else to consider is that because the original movie was such a success and it had something for everybody. You had Ben, Luke, Han, and Leia. They were all likable characters with flaws to overcome, but also some very admirable qualities and skills. Because that movie was such a success, you can expect that that everything following up on that success in the franchise would also do very well.
I think you also have to place it on the background of other sci-fi. And me as a sci-fi enthusiast, most of it is really, really bad. Like, science fiction, generally speaking, is just very, very bad. Yep. And seeing something that is remotely good coming out of that immediately spawns off a franchise. It always happens. It happened with Star Wars, Star Trek, Stargate, and several smaller pieces as well.
Alien.
I mean, just to name a few. If you strike gold in sci-fi, it means you strike gold for a significantly longer time.
Yeah. Pitch Black also to a lesser extent.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of examples to name, and I think there really are only two good science fiction works out there. Maybe there's more that other people can direct me to, but I think Babylon 5 and the remake of Battlestar Galactica are the only truly worthy of your time science fiction works out there. All the other science fiction works are just other works that use science fiction as a method to look cool.
Yeah, right. Series-wise, certainly. Like I said, Pitch Black is one of my favorite films in the franchise. Alien 3.
The Alien film's brilliant.
I wanted to just point out, because you go back to Robin's initial, or rather Adie's question, should I say? But I was intrigued by a conversation I had a few weeks ago about the whole Star Wars phenomenon, and why Star Wars hadn't become such a big thing for me. I mean, I kind of grew up. I mean, I was sort of 9 or 8 or 9 when I watched it with my brother. And so I think I was 10, maybe. Actually, I think I was about 9 or 10 or something. But and I never really kind of got into it. I watched it and enjoyed it, and went home and raved to my mum about it and blah blah blah. You know, like we all as children do. But it wasn't anything that I sort of thought, oh, I'm gonna kind of watch it again. And of course, back in those days, I'm talking like 1977, there was no such thing as the internet, right? There was no such thing as, well, there was, but it was a fairly low-level type of internet that wasn't generally used by the general public. So there was no way of watching these movies. So when I think it was not Return of the Jedi, but The Empire Strikes Back, which was the second sequel, came out like something like 3 or 4 years later, and it had this whole generation, at least my generation, at least elements in my generation, completely beside themselves. 4 years they had to wait for the next Star Wars movie, and so there was this kind of fascination, and what I wanted to do was link it into this kind of business of neglect that I think, ironically, we got the character, which I've lost my notes now, of course, so since rebooting, but the character who was Han Solo's son, and also Luke to some degree, that they were both neglected in a sense, and yet ironically, a lot of the massive like fan base that from my generation, I wonder to how much degree that they launched themselves into this fantasy of Star Wars, which kind of replicated this huge, like as Adie said, $40 billion thing, like buying models, buying toys, and all that kind of stuff. I wonder how many neglected children that franchise rode off the back of. And I'm not saying that in a kind of, I'm not saying it was taking advantage, etc. But I'm just saying, that I wonder to what degree, because it never really affected me. I never became obsessed with it. It interested me, it was fun, and but I wasn't interested in buying all the toys and watching back to back the movie again and again and again, and I just wonder how the parallels there. They're kind of interesting. I mean, they're anecdotal, of course, but I think they have some element of alignment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I certainly never understood the people who just watch it over and over again. Like, I mean, I still know people my age who do that. Like, just go and see it numerous times. No offense to anyone who's been to see this new Star Wars loads of times, but yeah, I mean, going to see it at the cinema more than once. I mean, I just don't. I mean, what is it that they're looking for? I mean,
well, it's a form of dissociation from reality. Some people choose, and this is the way I see it. Some people choose drugs, other people choose video games, and other people choose movies or TV shows. Sure. I know I have a tendency to go the TV show way. Like if I'm not careful, I tend to get lost in TV shows, and I like them because the story is longer. So I don't like repetition, but when I have a TV show that is like 10 seasons, then that is a good drug there for me. So I know I have to watch out whenever I am feeling sad or I have a down period. I tend to want to lose myself and to dissociate from reality. And I think we all have our kryptonite. And for some people, it's Star Wars. And I don't think that the producers are evil. They're incredible businessmen, and they do offer the market whatever the market asks for.
Yeah.
And it's a really nice point you made there about catering to the neglected children and their needs, because it really makes sense to me now why the script would be so infantile and so cartoon-like. I think it's done on purpose, because these people, I cannot believe that these people made $40 billion and cannot write a script. I think
you're conflating two things. I think that the new movie is more dumbed down than the old movies, and to illustrate that.
I'm sorry, according to Patrick, the other movies, the script was, if I'm correct, I think Patrick said the other movies were even worse. The script was even worse in the other movies.
No. I mean, there's definitely things about the other movies that are worse, but I think that's just because movies in general were different then. The older movies show that they were made in the 70s and 80s, sure. And if you compare them with other movies in the time, I think they are pretty good. If you compare them with movies now, they are not very good. But if you compare like the difference between the new movie and the older movies, I think that given the time they have been made in, the new movie could have made much better. And to the point that I wanted to make with that is that the older movies certainly cater to what you're saying now. I am 100% convinced of that, which doesn't mean anything, doesn't make it true. I don't think that's true for the new movie. I think the new movie is meant to cater to a huge audience and only mildly stimulate the people who want to get lost in it.
And what exactly makes you say, not that I'm disputing, I'm just really curious, what is it about the new movie that makes you think that?
Because it's more about the action is more flashier, and there is much less drama in it, in my opinion, compared to the older movies. The older movies are more a story that you get sucked into, and the new movie is more G.I. Joe in space.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And there's a lot of nostalgia as well. I mean, you talk about a broad audience. I mean, the biggest laugh that I heard when I was watching the film was when they said, "Oh, I've got a bad feeling about this," and that's just, it's not a funny thing to say, but I mean, everyone in the crowd who was like over 30, 40 was like, "Oh, I remember that." So. Great. Yeah, I mean, you're shoving a load of nostalgia, female empowerment.
Exactly.
Yeah, you tick all the boxes, don't you? And
well, this is where I sort of think it sort of comes from me. I had no interest in really watching it. It was only because really Robin and you guys kind of encouraged me to watch it. And I'm glad you did, by the way. I mean, I'm not bothered by that. It was a thoroughly enjoyable hour-and-a-half experience, but just for the sheer, entertainment value, it had some entertainment. But yeah, I mean, I do think a lot, certainly in my generation, I'm talking Generation X, I guess, and there is a lot of ridiculous nostalgia, which I don't have for the movie, but a lot of people I know in my generation do, and I wonder to what degree it had to do with this kind of, neglected history, etc. And buying into this kind of this story of Star Wars, etc. Kind of like, as Ailey said, a kind of good form of escapism. And I was just curious. It just struck me how interesting it was, how neglected the boys were in this movie, and yet this film. And I'm not going to obviously Catherine aside here, but obviously mostly the people I know that are interested in this movie are other men, and I wonder, the parallels just seemingly interesting there to me, but
I would think that might be more because it's an action movie, which usually men are more interested in.
But I obviously an action movie to some degree, but I'm just talking about those particular neglected histories that some of the male characters have had in their family history, and how that might be part of it, not the whole part.
Oh yeah,
of course,
sure.
But, yeah.
No, I would agree with that.
I was as you were talking, Pat, I was thinking about my experience with the original Star Wars films, and I was kind of I certainly wasn't around when came out, but my generation was kind of the videos, and having the neglectful parents who, me and my siblings watched a lot of TV as children, and so I guess I was about 12 when the new films came out, and I know me and my siblings and my friends, we were all really into the prequels. I know that's almost like shameful to admit because there's a lot of hate out there for the new films, but the prequels. But I quite liked them, and I went back to the theater with my friends to see them over and over again, and of course watched the originals on VHS over, and I was just kind of identifying, as you were talking about the neglected children. Like, I really think I fit into that somewhat with the video version of it, if that makes sense.
But even as a kid, it's like you only remember really the set pieces and the big flashy events as a kid. I mean, I still don't understand the prequels. I mean, the writing's just, the plot just doesn't make sense in so many areas. But I mean, you'd remember like a lot of the big, like, I mean, the plot to one of my favorite films when I was a kid was Jurassic Park: The Lost World, and that's universally panned for having a terrible script. And not making any sense. Like, why would they go back to the island? Why would they just camp there and not have any protection when they know there's T-Rexes? But I only remember the set pieces and the special effects. So I mean, we're looking at it with adult eyes, aren't we? This whole franchise, and not thinking about how it directly affects kids, and perhaps kids who haven't had that good an upbringing.
Yeah, I think it might have been just slightly different with my generation because we had this 4-year gap between the movie. So the children that really connected with it had this horrible 4-year wait, which is almost kind of replicates the neglect, right, of neglectful parents sometimes. And this is why they become so hugely fascinated by it later. Now, of course, I know later generations like yourselves, of course, have taken to the movie and the franchise, etc. But I just think it's an interesting difference because back in those days you couldn't just download the movie, you couldn't do, you kind of had to wait 4 years for a remake and all that kind of thing, and you could only ever and it took about 5 years to appear on the TV, so it wasn't like it was something that was available to you at a drop of a hat, even if you wanted to pay for it back then. So it was it's just I think it, just going back, I'm just talking generationally here, particularly about that. But look, we've had a great conversation, and great apologies for like my internet downtime. I know it's not my fault, of course, but it's still annoying all the same. But I think we should probably wrap it up, unless anybody really has anything they really want to end on it, and they've got some burning yearning they want to kind of end on, if there is.
I just wanted to mention, Pat, that I really liked
Sure.
how you ended with a story from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah, it was a long time ago as well. But yeah, okay. So listen, many thanks for joining in. I really, bar the little break in between that I had, I really enjoyed it, and look forward to more. And if you guys have any more, or any listeners listening out there, if you have any burning yearnings you want us to have a hangout on, just let us know, and we'll spend the time looking at it, and we'll have another show.
And also, I wanted to mention, if people have listened live, and if people are going to listen, I guess, Pat, we're going to have to put this together and post it on YouTube with a little bit of editing. But if people, if our members from the Philosophy Film Club have any other ideas or disagree with what we have said here, or if they want to make a contribution to this conversation, let's continue it in the Facebook group. You can find it, if you're not a member yet, you can find it, just search for Facebook in the group category and put Philosophy Film Club. You find us there. Join us, and let's keep the conversation rolling.
Yeah, thanks, Adi. And just to let everyone know that we will be we are on the verge of producing the next podcast on Inside Out. Really great movie. Really enjoyed it. I had a really good conversation with the caller that I discussed it with. So looking forward to that. It's probably going to be 2 weeks away at the very minimum, but we're going to get it out as soon as we can. And we are working on it. We are, both me and AD, we do work full time, so we're kind of stretched with our time. But and we've had a few difficulties over Christmas. But yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and I look forward to many more. And thank you guys for joining us. All right. Good night.
Good night.